What comes to mind when you hear about Elon Musk? Tesla's electric cars, SpaceX's reusable rockets, or maybe colonizing Mars? But then there's Musk's lesser-known project, which could soon change the course of history and perhaps eclipse the night sky for us forever. Starlink, which aims to sell internet connectivity to almost the entire planet via a growing network of in-private satellites orbiting just above our heads. What's the threat of a total internet takeover, and how could Starlink change the way we think about the global network? Find out in our video. After years of development at SpaceX and receiving nearly $885.5 million in grants from the Federal Communications Commission in the late 2020s, Starlink's progress accelerated significantly in 2021. In January, after about 3 years of successful launches, the project had more than 1,000 delivered satellites in orbit. In June, SpaceX said that the number was about 1,800, and in February, Musk said Starlink was serving more than 10,000 customers. After increasing pre-orders from potential customers in recent months, Musk says Starlink has delivered more than 100,000 satellite internet terminals to customers in 14 countries. Starlink is expected to be available worldwide this fall, but regional availability will depend on regulatory approval. But the promising internet service has not been without controversy. Members of the scientific community have expressed concerns about the impact of Starlink satellites on low Earth orbit and visibility in the night sky. Meanwhile, satellite internet competitors including Viasat, Usenet, and Amazon's Kuiper project have also taken notice of Starlink's momentum, resulting in numerous attempts to slow Musk down. But let's get it straight from the start. What is Starlink and how does it work? Technically, it's a division of SpaceX. Starlink is also the name of the space company's growing network of orbiting satellites. Development of this network began in 2015, and the first prototype satellites were put into orbit as early as 2018. In the years since, SpaceX has launched more than 1,000 Starlink satellites with dozens of successful launches. In January, for its first Starlink mission in 2021, SpaceX launched 60 satellites into orbit from Kennedy Space Center using a Falcon 9 restorable orbital rocket. Subsequent launches, the last of which put another 60 satellites into orbit on May 26, brought the total number of satellites in the constellation to 1,737, although some of these satellites are prototypes or inoperable units that do not operate within the system. And these satellites can connect my house to the internet? In general, yes, but so far the satellite internet provider has a number of questions. Like existing satellite internet providers such as Usenet or Viasat, Starlink wants to sell internet access especially to people in rural areas and other parts of the world that do not yet have access to broadband. SpaceX's Starlink hardware includes a satellite dish and router that you install in your home to receive the signal from space. Starlink is ideal for areas of the globe where internet connectivity is typically a challenge, the Starlink website says. Unencumbered by traditional terrestrial infrastructure, Starlink can provide high-speed internet in places where access was unreliable or completely unavailable. To establish a connection, all you need to do is install a small satellite dish in your home to receive the signal. There's even a Starlink app for Android and iOS that uses augmented reality to help customers choose the best location and position for their receivers. Eventually, Starlink hopes to cover the entire planet with a usable high-speed Wi-Fi signal. What is the speed of Starlink's internet service? Users can expect data rates to range from 50 to 150 megabits per second and latency to be between 20 and 40 milliseconds in most locations over the next few months, the Starlink website says, which also warns of brief periods of no connectivity at all. As we launch more satellites, install more ground stations, and improve our network software, data speeds, latency, and uptime will improve dramatically. To that end, Musk said on Twitter in February that he expects the service to double its top speed to 300 megabits per second by the end of 2021. What is the cost of Starlink? Starlink has begun taking pre-orders from customers willing to participate in the company's Better Than Nothing beta program. The service costs $99 a month, plus tax and fees, plus a $500 upfront payment for the satellite dish and router you need to install at home. Starlink says it accepts customer orders on a first-come, first-served basis and that some pre-orders can take up to 6 months. Granted, $99 a month is a lot for an internet connection, especially if it's not as fast as fiber optic connections, but Musk is betting that the cost will pay off for people who until now have lived without any web access. SpaceX President Gwen Shotwell recently told a satellite forum that Starlink has no plans to change prices for the service because of the intention to make the terms simpler and clearer. In addition, Shotwell said that the initial cost of a $500 receiving antenna will decrease in future years. Where is Starlink available? Although it has promised to cover the entire globe by the fall, the Starlink service is currently limited to certain regions in certain countries, but the coverage map will expand significantly as more satellites join the constellation. According to Musk, the list of countries currently served by the growing network of low Earth orbit satellites includes the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, Ireland, Belgium, Switzerland, Denmark, Portugal, Australia, and New Zealand. The Starlink pre-order agreement includes the ability to request services in other countries, including Italy, Poland, Spain, and Chile. Starlink will likely need at least 10,000 satellites in orbit before it can claim full service over most of the globe. SpaceX has shown signs that they need up to 42,000 satellites in the constellation. Currently, coverage is only 20% at best, and it's concentrated in areas between 45 and 53 degrees north latitude. We have successfully deployed about 1,800 satellites, and once all of those satellites reach operational orbit, we will have continuous global coverage, so it should be similar to the September timeline, said Gwen Shotwell. Why satellites? Isn't fiber faster? Internet provided by terrestrial fiber optic cable offers download and upload speeds that are indeed much faster than satellite internet. But according to companies like Google, deploying fiber optic infrastructure is time-consuming and tedious. That's not to say there's nothing easy about launching satellites into space, but with fewer aggressive competitors and much less bureaucracy to overcome, the task is significantly easier. Starlink will cover most of the planet long before fiber reaches every corner. And don't forget we're talking about Elon Musk, because SpaceX is the only company on the planet with a landable, reusable rocket capable of putting cargo into orbit. That's a huge advantage in this commercial space race. On top of that, Musk said in 2018 that Starlink would help provide SpaceX with the revenue needed to fund the company's long-standing ambition to build a base on Mars. If that day comes, it's likely that SpaceX will attempt to build a similar satellite system on the Red Planet as well. That means Starlink customers could potentially become the guinea pigs for future Martian wireless networks. If you're going to send 1 million people to Mars, you better allow them to communicate, Shotwell said in 2016, referring to Starlink's long-term vision. I don't think people going to Mars will be satisfied with a few ugly old-fashioned radios. They'll want their iPhone or Android on Mars. Interestingly, Starlink's terms of service include a clause about Mars in which users must accept that Mars is a free planet, not bound by the power or sovereignty of any Earth government. However, with maximum speeds currently set at 150 megabits, Starlink satellite internet won't be approaching the gigabit fiber speeds we're used to anytime soon. That's because of the enormous distance each transmission must travel in both directions. That's a factor that also increases latency, so you'll often notice awkward pauses in conversations if you're talking to someone over a satellite connection. Starlink promises to improve current expectations for satellite connections by placing satellites in orbit at lower altitudes than before, 60 times closer to the Earth's surface than traditional satellites. This low Earth orbit approach reduces distance for Starlink signals to reduce those latencies. Is Starlink reliable? Early reports from outlets such as Fast Company and CNBC seem to indicate that Starlink's first customers are happy with the service, although the company cautions that there will be brief periods of no connectivity during beta testing. What about bad weather and other obstacles? This is certainly one of the drawbacks of satellite internet. According to Starlink's FAQ, the receiver is able to melt snow that falls on it, but it can't do anything about other obstacles that can block the satellite's direct line of sight. Heavy rain or wind can also affect your satellite internet connection, potentially resulting in slower speeds or occasional disconnections. Are there any other problems with the Starlink satellites? The proliferation of in-private satellites in space is causing much concern, and astronomical circles disagree about the impact that low-orbiting satellites have on the night sky itself. Scientists obtained a long-exposure image of a group of distant galaxies at Lowell Observatory in Arizona that is marred by diagonal lines of light reflecting off the Starlink satellite shortly after their 2019 launch. In 2019, shortly after the first Starlink broadband satellites were deployed, the International Astronomical Union issued an alarming statement warning of unintended consequences when stargazing and protecting nighttime wildlife. Since then, Starlink has begun testing a series of new models designed to reduce the brightness and visibility of its satellites. In early 2020, the company tested a DarkSat satellite with a special non-reflective coating. Later in June 2020, the company launched a VisorSat satellite with a special sunshield. In August, Starlink launched another batch of satellites, this time all with visors. "We want to make sure we're doing it right so young kids can look through the telescope," Shotwell said. It's cool for them to see Starlink, but they have to look at Saturn, the Moon, and they don't want to be distracted. Starlink teams have been working closely with leading astronomers around the world to better understand the specifics of their observations and the technical modifications we can make to reduce the brightness of the satellites, the company's website says. Write in the comments what you think about satellite internet. Are you ready to connect to Starlink, or do you think fiber is the future?